Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a DMC update hosted by 40 Below, the Rochester Area Builders Young Professionals Group. My name is John Eischen, Executive Director of Rochester Area Builders, and unfortunately our chair, Katie, could not be here today, so I'm filling in for her. But thank you for joining us, and I would like to welcome Jamie Rothy and Chris Shad from DMC. They're going to give us some updates on Heart of the City and Discovery Walk. If you have any questions, you can just type them in. That's my job, is to watch for questions as we go along. And there will be time at the end for those questions. So if any come up, just let me know and I will be monitoring that. So with that, I will turn it over to Jamie in just a short second here.
Sounds good. Thanks, John.
And you should be good to go.
All right, I'm just gonna get everything up here. So thanks everybody for your time today. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us to talk about DMC and a few updates. I'm Jamie Rothy. I work on the DMC initiative, and one of the projects that I focus on is partnering with the city on the first phase of the Heart of the City project. I thought today I'd just give you a quick overview and then spend most of our time talking about something that we've created in partnership with the city and our partners called the Business Forward Strategy. And it's really a different approach to construction in a dense area that has three sections, something that we call microphasing, communications, and activation and programming. And we wanted to give everybody just a quick view of what we're doing and what we're working on, what's working well and what's not. And as always, we're happy to answer questions, during this time or after as well. So the first piece would just to give you a quick overview what's included in Heart of the City Phase 1, and it's really the plaza portion in front of the Chateau Theater. It also includes Second, between Second and Center, and then the parallel alley. Back in, oh gosh, it's been a few years now that the team came together to begin to work on the design of this space, and it really began with a lot of interviewing and information gathering about what improvements needed in this area. We spent time with the patient population and their companions. We spent time with community members. We spent time with the business owners and landowners. And this became a priority area for DMC in the city because we really saw it as our center of gravity. There's amazing things that happen in our downtown every day. And sometimes enhancing those spaces will create even more amazing things. And so the things that you're seeing here in this improvement, the first thing that you see on the east side of the plaza is an addition of a scrim pool. So it's in 1/4 of an inch of water that rests on top of pavers. They have these around in many places. If you've been to Chicago, Millennial Park, PV Plaza up in the cities now has a scrim pool as well. And this is built in a way that it can drain in the matter of just a couple minutes, and it's set up in zones. The circle that you see at the top of the screen represents an enhanced peace fountain. We spent time with the peace fountain sculptor's family to look at how we could really enhance the fountain. And it was a really great journey with them, understanding what the original intention was, what's worked well and why, and the different locations that it's been prior to this area, and then really collaborative came together on a new way. And the way that it's designed, especially with the scrim pool, is that you can go up and touch the fountain, you can play and look through the doves. It's really quite remarkable. On the west side of that scrim fountain, what you see is a brown box, and that's meant to represent flexible seating and stage. What we learned through our listening sessions and prototyping throughout the last couple of years was that our community was really looking for a place that could be flexible and used in lots of different ways. You may remember a few years ago, there was a picture of these like grand staircase that was shared. And there was a lot of like adverse reactions from that, saying, what is that? And where is the staircase going? And so we took that opportunity to have more dialogue with the community. And really what came back was, let's keep this space as flexible as possible. So as I mentioned before, the scrim pool goes away, and then that seating can flex out, so people can sit and eat for lunch, maybe in the middle of the day. This water could be drained, and there could be a band sitting on the stage-like space. So it can be really used and configured in many, many different ways. You also notice the immense amount of trees that are being added to the area. There's 100+ trees being brought in and around the plaza and along Second. A few other pieces to note, along First, along First, you'll see the trees, and you also see the widening of the sidewalks. The trees are being added, and then those brown boxes represent seating within the trees. So there's more places for people to linger longer, have outdoor meetings, meet friends, grab a bite to eat, take a minute to breathe. So the extra seating is all around that area. And then additional widened walk spaces. We really wanted to focus on making sure there was enough space that pedestrians felt safe and comfortable to walk. And then slowing down of traffic in this area is incredibly important, just with how much pedestrian traffic happens every single day. So you'll see 2 lanes, and then we get rid of the angled parking, and it turns into parallel parking. There's some right in front of Tangerine, Eagle Drug, and Essence, and then there's an additional parking kind of underneath the skyway between the Kaler and the Wells Fargo building. A few other pieces to note with the design is that accessibility was extremely important. We did an accessibility study early on and found that much of this area is not really deemed accessible with some of the different angles of pavement, and there's a lot of challenges in this area. So it does go to a curbless street. We also address safety with lighting. So there's a couple different types of lighting that are being installed into this area along the sidewalks and streetscape. The lines that you see that are above the plaza, that is representing a catenary light system. This light system is designed by an artist who works in light, and it just has a more contemporary look. It'll go across the intersection as you see there. But one of the unique things about this lighting installation is that in certain areas, there'll be a intercom that someone can walk up and speak into, and your voice is turned into light and then begins to bounce around the catenary light system above you. That reflecting on the water is very beautiful. We also have a local artist that's been involved with the design of this. His name is Eric Anderson. He's been involved with the prototyping a few years ago, and then now is also having a piece installed where there's a micro mist that goes around the edge of the scrim fountain. And he's taking data from our community, and he's actually taking health data, and a small micro fog, it's very light, will come up almost like a breath. And so they're working through significant life activities, maybe like a birth or a transplant, maybe a cancer treatment. But this would almost be like the plaza just breathes just lightly to represent the amazing things that are happening in our community. If you're interested at all, there's definitely a lot more information about the rest of the design aspects on our website as well. So I wanted to share a little bit about the business forward strategy. Early on in this process, we recognized that this construction process and project would be highly disruptive. With Mayo Clinic and all the patients and companions that come every year, plus the dense amount of hospitality and dining and entertainment, shopping that happens in this area, we needed to figure out a different approach. So early on, we started meeting with the businesses and landowners and users of this area to understand what their concerns were around construction. We wanted to understand from the businesses and landowners about their perspective on how do we keep people moving in this area. And we brought our entire team with us for those interviews. So our construction team, the general contractor KA, also Cohen and Partners, the city, DMC, and others all participated in all of these meetings. Then we took all that information back and started analyzing it. And that is where we came up with really the business forward strategy that includes 3 components. The first one is something that we call microphasing. What we wanted to do is take what we heard from all of the stakeholders, and we wanted to build it in a way, the construction phasing in a way that kept those priorities in mind. And so, of course, what we heard from the business owners were shortened construction cycle. We also heard about dust mitigation and sound mitigation, and then pedestrian traffic, and that it couldn't look like a really heavy, busy construction site. They knew that if people saw that, they wouldn't want to walk through it. Communications is the second bucket, and activation and programming. So I'm just going to walk through a couple quick examples of what those look like. So at the highest level of construction, we worked with our team to come up with a phasing strategy that kept the businesses' sidewalks open. And this was really complex to try to figure this out because it included infrastructure below ground, but then a complete redo all the way up to the buildings, including a snow melt system, tree boxes, and a variety of other pieces. And so we looked at it in 2 sections. The purple represents the pedestrian access. The yellow represented the construction that's currently happening now. And then we created flexible pedestrian areas. And this was interesting because we wanted to make sure that people felt like they could walk around the plaza the entire time, but we knew this was a large commitment. And so it was not only a commitment of funds from DMC and the city to make sure that these flexible pedestrian access points were always open, but it was also a commitment to each and every person on the project that people are walking through these areas, and we wanted to make it feel safe and secure and accessible. So we ended up with that they just they laid down concrete walkways in these areas, and then we have significant signage in these areas to help people navigate it. And then all the team members down there are always constantly helping people navigate this area as well. Our second phase, which we're moving into actually already, is a screen that you see in front of you, and it starts us moving people to the businesses. So you'll see the purple part is now what's getting close to be completed. And then we have bridges that go to every single storefront so people can walk in. And then we're actually breaking this up again into a micro-phased approach where we'll work through section by section to get in and out of each section as quickly as possible. We're excited about this because it's been a really unique way to approach it, and we're really seeing some great results with it. The second bucket is our commitment to communication. So early on, I mentioned that we met with businesses one-on-one, and throughout the process, we've continued to build really great relationships with all the businesses downtown. What you're seeing in front of you is a weekly email that goes out to all of the stakeholders. So businesses, landowners, and all of our community stakeholders receive an update that has the progress that they're seeing, any information that's important, and then links to different resources and also webcams. We also committed to a weekly meeting. So every Friday at 9, the businesses and landowners and then all of our community stakeholders in this area join on a call. So it's the Mayo Clinic, Rochester Downtown Alliance, the city, DMC, the Chamber of Commerce, and others are participating in that call. We provide updates, but then really open it up for great dialogue around what's working well and why, what's coming up next. And then we've committed to taking the businesses' ideas about how we can improve, and then apply them to the construction project. We also have a hotline, which is great. And then businesses also know that if they've got immediate concerns, we were purposeful about the construction office being right in the construction zone. So we're renting an unused storefront at the moment. So Troy Dale from KA and his team are always there. And then myself and Josh Johnson from the city are always available to answer questions. And we're in around the site as much as we can be. The last bucket is activation and programming, and that again came from feedback from all of the businesses and landowners in this area. Navigation was extremely important. The look and feel of the site was extremely important. And then how are we encouraging people to come in and around the space? So these are two examples of, we did a significant wayfinding installation on the barriers, and we worked with local designer Sarah Miller from Whitespace on this, along with another layer of wayfinding. And then we also made improvements to the west side of the plaza, adding more seating. We added more improvements to the skyways as well for navigating in and around this area. And then we also have looked for really unique partnerships for programming as well. This is an example, you can't really see in the box too well, but we formed a partnership with Rochester Mom, which is a blog here in town, and we do a weekly post with them on social media, and then we have activation and programming. And what you're seeing right here is like a seek and find scavenger hunt. Kids can either have their parents print off a form at home, or they can grab a form here in this box, and then there's also a construction hat in there for them to grab, and then they're on their way, moving around the construction site. This does a lot of things for us. It helps us to keep people informed about the project, and then also gets families down into the space and exploring construction. And we have more programming like this that we do and that we have planned for in the future. One thing I didn't mention is just a quick update with regard to the impact of COVID. This construction project started right when COVID was hitting, and that was a big decision to make with our city partners and other community stakeholders around the table. And we pulled in a lot of people to understand what were the right steps and what we should do. And essentially, we did a 2-day workshop where we brought all the stakeholders back together to understand what was happening, what we knew at that point. It was a very, very different world, and how we could move forward. And so the team started making some different commitments to the project. So for example, before we were focused on working hours around keeping the hotels quiet at night, or the sound quiet at night, or working around different busy hours in that area. But there was a recommitment at that time once COVID hit to say, how fast can we work? And so now we have teams that are working, or we're working 12 to 16-hour days to accelerate the projects as quick as possible. And we're seeing some of those benefits already. We're starting to forecast ends of these projects. And originally we were looking at August of 2021 of being done with everything put back together. And now we're looking at spring and some portions even winter of this year complete because of those accelerations that we did and that time that we took to kind of reconvene our groups to understand the impact of COVID and how we can make improvements. So with that, maybe I will pause there. We'll do questions at the end, and I'll hand it over to Chris to give an update regarding Discovery Walk.
Well, great. John, thank you for the invitation to come speak to everybody today. My name is Chris Shad. I'm with the Destination Medical Center Economic Development Agency. My role is primarily all things Discovery Square, which is the innovation district that is being built on the more of the south side of the DMC, overall DMC district. It's just 16 block geography south of the Hilton Guggenheim building from, let's see, 3rd Street on down to 6th Street or so. And I'm here to spend a little bit of time talking about Discovery Walk, which is a public realm project. Make sure I can navigate going forward. And we're partnering with the city, City of Rochester, Cohen and Partners on this project. So that I don't bury the lead, we'll jump right to the project schedule that might be of interest to this group. There's been a lot of activity taking place. We're in August of 2020, but conversations about Discovery Walk have gone back at least 2 years where we were engaging the community. And thus far, we've really seen strong support for this project, not only from the community, the downtown community, the neighborhoods that are like the Downtown Neighborhood Association and the Historic Southwest Neighborhood Association, but also from city leadership as well. So it's been an interesting and fun process to go along for somebody with a science background of myself. This is a new kind of world to navigate, but it's been a gratifying process so far. We are in the midst of the DD bidding and design scope work that's taking place, and we're working on the CD approvals. We're working towards that in November of this year, and council approvals as we anticipate sometime around May putting this out for, or in March, sorry, putting this out for bidding and for construction then to begin next year. So it seems like a fairly compressed timeline. What we were trying to balance was the right timing for getting this out to bid based on the right kind of season to get this out to bid while still completing the DD work. A little bit about what Discovery Walk is and where it is. So this north is to the right on here, that pink red area, Annenberg Plaza, that's where the Mayo Gonda Plumber Building Complex is. And on this bottom right side, this is all of that space that Jamie was just talking about the Heart of the City project. And Discovery Walk is running right through along 2nd Avenue. So from 2nd Street, the corner of 2nd Avenue, 2nd Street, running 4+ blocks along 2nd Avenue down to the entrance of Soldiers Field. And one thing that I'll note is that there has been strong enough interest that the project is actually extending just beyond the 6th Street intersection and entering into the Soldiers Field Park area. That's some recent changes that we see happening here. 2nd Avenue is a relatively underutilized street here. And at some point in the future, the square of Discovery Square, we hope will be right along its path. The community outreach, community engagement, stakeholder input process has been fairly extensive. Lots of listening sessions with people voting with their little pink cards or dot exercises, and just doing a lot of listening. Some of the commentary that we were hearing about parking and safety and water features and getting people out in all seasons. Through the middle here, I think there's some interesting feedback, or really good feedback, that we got from the community. Should vehicular traffic still be allowed along Discovery Walk? And it was fairly evenly split between yes and no. And so as a consequence, there still will be vehicular traffic. Cars and vehicles will be able to travel along its length, pushed over to the east side of the street, as we'll see in a minute here. But being able to temporarily close the street for events was important. Strong consensus that are we showing enough green space in some of the design? Are there enough activity spaces? Seasonal activities is really important. We've had a lot of strong feedback for wintertime activities along Discovery Walk. But that means they also have a strong interest in warming elements, which would make sense, I guess. And then, interesting enough, do you currently use 2nd Avenue? And not a lot of people that have been surveyed and reached out to actually use it. I would characterize 2nd Avenue as a place that you go through and not to. And if we're realize the vision of what we collectively have pulled together for Discovery Walk, 2nd Avenue would become a place to go to as well as a place to go through. So lots of feedback, and that has been baked into the plan. One thing, I'm going to go back up to that. One thing that did not get included in the slide deck, and we probably need to going forward, is we partnered with the University of Minnesota on a process called community co-design. And so by working with the Diversity Council, Kevin Bright from our office, and worked with the Diversity Council and went through a real intentional process of reaching out to underserved communities, communities of color in Rochester, to specifically get their input and feedback on what Discovery Walk ought to be, how it ought to look, how it should operate, hours of operation, the layout of the space, all of those things. And it was a very intentional process that they took the team through. Lots of really good feedback. And I think it's fair to say it was feedback that we we probably would not normally get through the usual ways of doing community engagement. We've learned a lot through this process. And in fact, this co-design process is being baked into our activities going forward as well, because it's been such a useful exercise to go through. And in fact, part of the process of the community co-design and getting those co-designers involved included making sure that the engagement opportunities were at times of day and days of the week that worked best for them, not best for us. And that it included a stipend, a modest stipend for their time, and even support for childcare, because it wasn't always possible to get childcare for the individuals that were participating. And it was so effective that some of the designers, some of these community co-designers who don't necessarily have a background in design, but really can very nicely represent parts of our community, are being added to the design team going forward as we go through the next stages of the design. So it was a good exercise to go through, and we see that being baked into many of our future projects as well. What we heard about what Discovery Walk should be, it should feel like a park. It should be flexible for access and events, promote health and wellness and innovation, connect that Soldiers Field to heart of the city. You saw that on the map there. A unique programming and experience opportunity, be accessible and safe, and also support future development. We see this is creating areas that are ripe for development along its length. This would be a view looking to the south. If you were on one of the top floors of the Mayo building, this is the Hilton Guggenheim building. This is not a building that exists right now. This is a parking lot. This is the Franklin heating station. This is looking to the south along Discovery Walk, 2nd Avenue, down towards Soldiers Field. You'll see there's still vehicle traffic, extended sidewalks, lots of trees. Jamie mentioned the trees that are going in along heart of the city. A lot of greenery will be going into Discovery Walk as well. So the themes that came out of the community engagement sessions, nature, community, innovation, and play. And so that gets translated into water elements and gardens and gathering spaces, programming, art, sustainable systems, and again, that year-round interest that our community has said they were interested in. So a curbless street, lift the street up to curb level so it can be turned into a plaza if you block off the space for events. The travel lanes are pushed to the east, and the green space and the more walkable space is on to the west side, and that allows us to maximize the green space. There's sustainability is intended to be baked into this length of parkway. I guess it's not a park and it's not a drive-through, a driveway, it's like a parkway. Stormwater management, native and adaptive plants, and if you were to step outside of the One Discovery Square building that this will run along, those native plants that went into the boulevards are really coming into their own this year. It's really nice to see that they've taken root so nicely. Urban forest, microclimates. It's really interesting if you have any experience walking around downtown Rochester. It seems like every corner has a slightly different wind shear to it and sun availability at different times of the year. And that has to be incorporated into the design of the space. This is another view of it. We're looking straight down. Again, north is to the right and south is to the left, and this is where it's showing it the entry into. I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit more here. This is where we're starting to try to understand how does this enter into the Soldiers Field space. And so we're fairly early in those conversations. For orientation here, this is People's Food Co-op. This is First Avenue. Broadway is down here. This is the entrance into Soldiers Field. That's the track in the wintertime. That's the ice loop. But can we have this, can we enter into the gateway of Soldiers Field, traversing down the length of Discovery Walk? Like I said, that was a relatively late change to the project to extend not to 6th Street, but through and across 6th Street. Let's see if I can get my, there we go, maybe that's better. So activation throughout the 4 seasons, timing of year and the bloom of the trees and when the foliage looks best and the greenery looks best, but also the use of the space. So the theme around springtime is discover nature as we emerge from a Minnesota winter, and how do we make sure that we have space that can be utilized in the springtime. There may or may not end up being a water element that runs along there. We do know that we need climate accommodation systems along the way. It's to be determined if we're ultimately going to have a water system that runs the length of it. So this is a view of what it might look like in the springtime. You could see where the roadway off to the one side and the green space off to the right side there. In the summertime, peak activity, maybe splash pad, maybe water features, but lots of greenery, lots of green space. We just had a fascinating conversation just last week as a team about swings. A lot of people like swings, but what we don't realize is swings take a lot of space and lots of unintended consequences of not accounting for that space. Colliding, I guess, is what would be the word that I would use using a swing. So we're not sure what that's going to look like, but we know that our patients and our visitors are looking for a space that they can go to where it's quiet, a sort of contemplative space. And for our employees that are working down there, as more and more businesses are moving into the Discovery Square district, employees are going to be looking for places where they could step outside and get away for a few minutes, perhaps over the lunch break. This kind of space is going to be important during those summer months. And here's another view from the springtime then, showing how it might look when all is said and done. In the fall, activity would continue. We have conversations about how do we incorporate spaces for what I'll call pop-up retail, but for use year-round, not necessarily only food trucks, but maybe a farmer's market-like sort of thing, or an equivalent or an analog to a Thursdays downtown, but perhaps on another day, something we don't know for sure, but we want to make sure that we can account for activities, including some pop-up retail sorts of activities that take place along some portion of Discovery Walk. And in some cases, that means, like for food trucks, for example, they need power, making sure that we've got adequate power stations along the way so they don't have to run the generators, which are very loud and noisy, and making sure that there's water available in the right context so that that can be available. So it's going to be fun to figure out how that all happens, but we know we want to account for that space. And we want that to be another place that people can go to in the downtown market. That's a look of what might look like when we get to fall time. And then that winter experience, it's easy to get sheltered in place, if you will, through the winter months, but we've got very clear feedback from the community surveys that we've done and interviews that we've done that winter activation is really important, especially for the families that are the people that are living downtown or live adjacent to downtown. So having heating elements along the way, what we've been calling climate accommodation versus climate protection. Spaced along Discovery Walk, warm stations that you can get from one to the next, but you might have to travel between them to get from one to the next. In the fullness of time, there may be subway connections running along the length, but not to begin with, no doubt. But there will be warming stations along the way for people to be in all seasons. There's those swings again. They seem to pop up in every picture, but we know that people want to be active and out in that space in the wintertime. So I think this is my last slide. The idea, back to the original themes: nature, innovation, community, and play, all along this space that right now is a very underutilized city street that's traversed mostly by buses and delivery trucks, which still need to have access, by the way, the delivery trucks to get access to the buildings for deliveries. But can we create another space for people to go to that would complement Heart of the City and connect Heart of the City, run a thread from Heart of the City down to Soldiers Field through a green space that we can create. I will end there, and I think we can open it up for questions. But I need John's help for that.
Yes, I did receive a question.
Jamie, maybe you can come back on too.
Working on it.
There you are.
Oops. So with many hundreds of, if not thousands of Mayo employees permanently working remotely, how is DMC pivoting or changing course? Or is
You
that
want to
maybe
take that first, Jamie?
Sure, I'm happy to. So I think all cities, across the globe, especially right now across the United States, are dealing with this question about how does this impact urbanization? We were on a big trend of people shifting to the way that they were living and working and playing, and now with COVID, we have this impact. It's a very complex answer to start working through. The first piece is, I think, to recognize that we are in the beginning of this pandemic. And so we cannot forecast, and it's difficult to forecast what the short-term and long-term impacts are going to be. We have hired HR&A to help us understand what those impacts are. And that's part of our 5-year update that DMC will be working on and sharing more about in the next coming months. So with HR&A, along with our other city colleagues and other organizations across the city, we're trying to understand what that impact of COVID is in a lot of different ways, including employment. Mayo Clinic is on, and I can't speak for them, but with talking with them, they're trying to figure out what the best model is right now for their business. And their priority right now is to keep patients safe in the current environment. And so to do that, they're choosing to move and ask their business or ask their teams to work differently. And so with that, they're still trying to figure that out. We were just actually talking with Director of Facilities last week, Doug Holton, just about how are they thinking about doing this, and what does hoteling look like, where are employees coming in, because they still need to do collaboration work in a safe environment. And because they're an integrated care model, the essence of the organization is that research and education and practice work together. And with that is the allied health staff members or administrative staff. The value that the organization brings is that everybody is working hand in hand for the needs of the patient. So they're trying to figure out what's that balance. And so as they're figuring that out, we're working closely with them to understand, so what does hoteling look like downtown? Is it collaborative space? How often are people coming down? And then on top of that, really our community's work is saying, now if you're only going to come downtown 2 days a week, how do we make sure that that's the best downtown experience that you ever have? So how are we working closely with the chamber and the RDA and the other organizations to make sure that if you're going to come downtown, that it's the time that you're there has the best experience that you can, whether it be transportation, meeting space, dining options, entertainment, collaborative space, whatever that looks like, it should be as authentic and have all the things that you need in that one spot. So like I mentioned, there's not a big, easy answer to it. It's fairly complex, but that's what we're working through right now. And Chris, maybe you have more to add to that.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, I find myself saying this a lot, that we've never done this sort of thing before. We don't really know. It's not like we've got any experience to fall back on. The terminology I'm hearing though is next normal, not new normal, right? And which suggests to me that, well, the next thing that we're doing is this, but that's not where we're landing. It may be where we land, and it may be a permanent thing, or may not be. We're going to have to see. I'm already you know, in my review of trade journals and things like that, I'm already seeing like, well, we've swung to this and it seems to be working, but it might have been working. I'm not talking about Mayo now, I'm talking in general. It might have been working because there was this intense effort like this. We're all going to rally around this. We're moving away from our offices and we're going to make it work. But it perhaps was unsustainable as a pace because it was just intensive. We're going to make this work, but how do you sustain that long term? And so there's a possibility, it's a distinct possibility to me anyway, that it shifts back in some way. So I would, you know, I see the terminology next normal, not new normal. And I think, you know, I can't speak for Mayo, but I can see these things shifting over time.
Sure. Yeah, I hate that new normal, really. I try to avoid saying it whenever I can. I just
Yeah.
use the current situation we find ourselves in.
Yeah, the current normal. Yeah.
Because
Which
yeah,
feels
you're
very
right.
abnormal.
Let's use the word today.
And
Today
you're correct.
normal. Yeah.
That's a big question and not something that we can, you know, we're going to have all the answers. But, you know, it's a DMC update and
Yep.
I think it's on a lot of people's mind or members' minds and that type of thing is what impacts there may be coming just from the pandemic. Sure. And, you know, I'm the only one in the office here. Everybody else is working remotely
Yep.
just because we know we can do it safely. And my conference room, we normally have 12 to 14 people sitting around, but with social distancing, I can fit 4.
Right.
We're still continuing to have our board meetings virtually too. So
Yep.
we're all trying to pivot, I think is the new word for 2020. There's some other choice words that I won't mention, but when 2020 is talked about, but, pivot seems to be the new buzzword. So I haven't seen any other questions pop through. So on behalf of 40 Below, thank you, Jamie and Chris, for participating. I'm glad you mentioned the 5-year plan, Jamie, because that's one of the conversations one of our other councils, the Commercial Builders Council, is interested in having with Mayo, and that's kind of the 5-year plan update. So I'm glad you mentioned that's coming up too. So with that, I will say thank you again, and thank you for participating. We will post this on the the 40 Below Facebook page through our YouTube channel. And so if you missed it or friends missed it, you'll be able to see it. So thank you again and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.